I pushed for an open marriage. 3 years later, I'm living my biggest regret. Before we dive into today's story, I just want to say, if you enjoy these stories and appreciate the time and effort that goes into creating them, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly means the world to us and helps us keep bringing you more heartfelt content. Sparkling Heart. Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer, 35 years old, and a mom to two amazing kids, Ethan, who's 12, and Chloe, who's 9. I've been married to my high school sweetheart, Daniel, who's now 36, for the past 15 years. We met when we were just teenagers. He was the quiet, dependable guy who sat behind me in math class, and I was the talkative girl who somehow convinced him to skip prom to watch movies at my parents' house. We started young, with very little. In the beginning, we shared a tiny one-bedroom apartment, working multiple jobs just to make rent and keep food on the table. But over time, we built a good life together. Daniel worked his way up in construction management while I balanced part-time work and raising our kids. We bought our first house when I was pregnant with Chloe, and by most standards, we were doing well, financially stable, surrounded by friends, and raising two healthy, happy kids. Our marriage wasn't perfect, of course. We had arguments, moments of stress, and times when life just felt like an endless loop of work, bills, and parenting. But through it all, we were a team, or at least I thought we were, until about 3 years ago, when a decision I pushed for changed everything. Everything was going smoothly in our life, with our kids, with Daniel, with everything. We had built a stable home filled with laughter, routines, and little traditions that meant the world to us. Sure, we had small fights sometimes, about chores, about who forgot to buy milk, about me taking too long to get ready, but those were just normal couple fights, nothing serious. Daniel was always the caring husband, the kind of man who remembered every single detail about me. He knew every one of my allergies and would double-check ingredient labels without me even asking. He knew exactly which flowers to bring home when he wanted to brighten my day, lilies, because roses made me sneeze. He knew how I liked my food, right down to the way I wanted my pasta cooked or how much sugar went in my coffee. Caring was his love language, and he showed it in 1,000 small ways every single day. On busy mornings, he would quietly pack my favorite snacks in my bag, knowing I might skip lunch. When I had a bad day, he'd run me a warm bath and light my favorite lavender candle without saying a word, just letting me relax. On our anniversary, he'd write me little notes about our memories instead of buying expensive gifts, because he knew words meant more to me than jewelry. Sometimes, I would look at him and think, how did I get so lucky? In a world where so many people complained about their partners being inattentive, distracted, or emotionally unavailable, I had a man who truly saw me and loved me exactly as I was. We had two beautiful kids, Ethan, our curious 12-year-old who loved building things, and Chloe, our 9-year-old who could talk anyone into a game of dress-up. Our home wasn't just a house, it was a safe haven. About 4 years ago, I started a new job at a mid-sized marketing firm. The pay was good, better than I had ever earned before, and it gave me a sense of independence I hadn't felt in years. I loved the work, but even more than that, I loved the people I met there. My new colleagues were different from anyone I'd been around in a long time. They were a little chaotic, loud, and unpredictable, but they were also incredibly warm and understanding. Being around them made me feel different, like I had stepped back into my teenage years, carefree and buzzing with energy. They invited me to after-work drinks, impromptu weekend getaways, and late-night group chats full of jokes and confessions. I became close to a few of them especially, but my strongest bonds formed with Hannah and Sophie. Hannah was this bold, adventurous type who always had a wild story to tell, and Sophie was witty, charming, and had this way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. Before I knew it, I was spending more and more time with them, texting them during my lunch breaks, laughing over cocktails after work, and sharing personal stories I hadn't told anyone in years. Around them, I wasn't just Jennifer, the wife and mom. I felt like a different version of myself, a version I hadn't seen in a long time. We talked about everything, work drama, relationships, dreams, and all the little things you only share with people you feel truly comfortable around. Sophie wasn't married. In fact, she openly admitted she didn't like commitments at all. She was a free spirit to her core, always chasing new experiences, traveling at the drop of a hat, dating casually, and according to her, marriage would feel like a prison. Hannah's story was different. She had been married once but got divorced just 2 years in. It had been messy, and she told me she never wanted to go through that again. She enjoyed her independence, dating when she wanted to but never tying herself down. So when they first heard about my life with Daniel, how we'd been together since high school and married for nearly 15 years, they were shocked. They kept asking how I managed to stay committed to one person for almost 20 years. Sophie found it sweet but insane, while Hannah called it rare but maybe a little boring. They said they were impressed by my loyalty, but there was also this undertone in their reactions, like they couldn't imagine choosing what I had. At the time, I laughed it off, feeling almost proud of my stable marriage. But slowly, their words started echoing in the back of my mind, making me wonder if maybe they were seeing something I wasn't. The more time I spent with Hannah and Sophie, the more I noticed a shift in my own thoughts. At first, I brushed off their comments about marriage being limiting or boring. After all, I loved Daniel, and our life together was good. But over time, their stories about dating different people, traveling without having to check in with anyone, and having complete freedom started to stick in my head. Sophie would talk about late-night adventures with new people she'd just met, or about the thrill of not knowing who she might end up with next weekend. Hannah, on the other hand, would say things like, "You don't even know what's out there, Jen. You've been with one guy your whole adult life." They didn't say it to be mean, it was always in a joking, playful tone, but those little comments planted tiny seeds in my mind. Sometimes after a night out with them, I'd come home and lie awake in bed next to Daniel, wondering what it would be like to experience something new. Not because I didn't love him, but because I started to think maybe we'd settled down too young, before we had the chance to explore. It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided I wanted more. It was a slow creep, little thoughts here and there, moments of curiosity that I never used to have. And the more I talked to Hannah and Sophie, the more those thoughts began to feel normal, even tempting. Then one day, Sophie looked at me across the table during one of our Friday night hangouts and said, "Jen, you're missing so much. Life is too big to hold on to only one person forever." Hannah immediately jumped in, nodding in agreement. "Exactly. It's great to have one committed relationship. You've built that foundation with Daniel, but that doesn't mean you can't still have fun with someone else. You'd be surprised how many couples open their marriage and are happier for it." I laughed it off in the moment, but their words stuck with me like glue. On the drive home that night, I kept hearing Sophie's voice in my head, "Life is too big to hold on to only one person." It sounded so harmless, almost freeing. By the time I pulled into our driveway, that little seed of curiosity had started to sprout into something much bigger. For a few days, I didn't say anything. I just kept replaying Sophie and Hannah's words in my head, imagining how it might feel to have that kind of freedom without actually leaving Daniel. The more I thought about it, the more it started to seem reasonable. I told myself it wasn't about falling out of love with him, it was about adding excitement to our lives, breaking the routine, making things fresh again. One Saturday night, after we'd put the kids to bed, Daniel and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. I'd had a glass of wine, and my mind was buzzing with everything I'd been holding in. During a commercial break, I muted the TV and said, "Can I ask you something, kind of weird?" He gave me this cautious smile. "Sure. What's up?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. "Have you ever thought about us seeing other people?" Daniel's smile faded instantly. "What? Like, cheating?" No, not cheating," I said quickly, trying to sound casual. "I mean, like, opening our marriage. You know, still being together, still committed to each other, but also being able to explore with other people." He just stared at me for a long moment, like I'd suddenly started speaking another language. "Jennifer, why would you even want that? We're fine. We're happy. Aren't we?" I reached for his hand, trying to make it sound like a mutual benefit. "We are happy, Daniel. I love you. But we've been together our whole lives, don't you ever wonder what else is out there? I'm not saying replace each other, I'm saying, just see what it's like. It could even make us stronger." He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. "That's not how I see marriage. I don't want to be with anyone else." And that should have been the end of it. But I didn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, I kept bringing it up, dropping little comments, telling him about couples I'd read about online who claimed it made their relationship better than ever. I even hinted that it might help me feel more fulfilled, hoping he'd see it as a way to make me happy. It wasn't easy. He resisted, we argued, and for a while, he barely spoke to me about it. But I didn't let it go. I kept bringing it up, dropping little comments, telling him about couples I'd read about online who claimed it made their relationship better than ever. I even hinted that it might help me feel more fulfilled, hoping he'd see it as a way to make me happy. Daniel still didn't agree, but I kept pushing. And then one night, in the middle of another argument about it, I looked at him and said, "If you can't do this for my little happiness, you're going to lose me." I didn't mean it as a threat at the time, but the words came out sharp and final. Eventually, he gave in. Not because he wanted it, but because he loved me and didn't want to lose me. Looking back now, that was the moment I unknowingly set a ticking time bomb in our marriage. When we finally agreed to open our marriage, I felt this rush of anticipation, like I was stepping into a completely new chapter of my life. Hannah and Sophie were thrilled when I told them. Hannah even offered to help me set up a dating profile, and Sophie joked about screening my matches for me. It all felt fun, lighthearted, and exciting, at least for me. Daniel, on the other hand, was quieter than usual. He didn't complain, but there was something in his eyes, a heaviness I chose not to acknowledge. I told myself he'd adjust, that once he saw how it could work, he might even enjoy it too. My first date was with a guy I met through a mutual friend of Sophie's. We went out for drinks, laughed, flirted, and for the first time in years, I felt that giddy, teenage-like excitement. I came home late that night, expecting Daniel to be asleep, but he was sitting on the couch in the dark. He smiled faintly when I walked in and asked if I had a good time, but his voice was tight, and his eyes didn't quite meet mine. Over the next few weeks, I went on more dates, coffee meetups, dinner, even a weekend lunch that ran hours longer than I'd planned. Each time, Daniel would say he was fine, but his smile never reached his eyes. He started staying up later, scrolling on his phone or watching TV alone while I was out. I could feel the distance growing, but I ignored it, convincing myself that this was just the adjustment phase. I was chasing that thrill, the excitement of being wanted by someone new, while Daniel was slowly slipping further into himself. And I didn't see just how much it was hurting him. For almost 3 months after we opened the marriage, Daniel didn't go on a single date. He said he wasn't in a rush, that he was still figuring out if it was for him. Most weekends, while I was out meeting someone new, he stayed home with the kids, helping with homework, cooking dinner, tucking them into bed. I told myself he was fine with it, that this was the balance we'd agreed on. Then, one evening out of the blue, he told me, "I've got a date tomorrow." It caught me completely off guard. For the first time in 3 months, I felt off. A strange tightness curled in my chest, like something heavy pressing down on me. I didn't say anything, though. I smiled, told him that was great, and then the next day, I went on my date like nothing had changed. But something had changed. When he finally did go out, I found myself checking the time, wondering where he was, who he was with, and why it bothered me so much when I'd been doing the exact same thing for months. And then, when he came home smiling, looking lighter than he had in a long time, I realized I didn't like the feeling at all. After Daniel went on that first date, things started to shift, quietly at first, but steadily. I could feel it in the way he glanced at his phone, hoping for a message or a call. He began spending more time texting this new woman, smiling at things I couldn't see. Meanwhile, I was juggling my own dates, but with every new person I met, I started noticing a growing distance between us. I found myself watching him more, listening for changes in his voice, reading too much into his silences. The man who used to be so open and warm became guarded, sometimes distant. He stopped sharing little things, what he ate for lunch, funny moments with the kids, even his thoughts about his day. And then the jealousy crept in. It hit me like a wave I wasn't prepared for. I'd catch myself wondering who he was with, what she looked like, if he was happier with her than with me. I'd think about the details he might be sharing with someone else, details that used to belong only to us. One night, after I came home late from a date, I found Daniel sitting on the couch, his eyes red. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was hurting. For the first time, I saw how much this open arrangement was costing us. That's when the cracks started to show in our perfect life, the same life I had once thought was unbreakable. After that first date, Daniel began going out more frequently. At first, it was just occasional coffee meetups or dinners, but gradually, the nights out became more regular. I noticed something else too. He started laughing more, his mood lifting in a way I hadn't seen in months. At first, I thought I should be happy for him. Maybe this was what he needed, a chance to be himself again outside of the roles of husband and dad. But deep down, every laugh, every smile he shared with someone else felt like a quiet sting. It was as if the part of him that once belonged only to me was slipping away, little by little. Meanwhile, I was still chasing my own excitement, going on dates, feeling that rush of something new. But the thrill started to fade, replaced by a gnawing emptiness I couldn't ignore. The more Daniel embraced this new freedom, the more I felt myself losing him, not just physically, but emotionally. Our conversations became strained and shallow. We stopped sharing our days, our thoughts, our fears. The closeness we once had turned into awkward silences and half-hearted smiles. One evening, I caught him laughing at something on his phone, and the sight broke something inside me. I realized then how much we had changed, how far apart we'd grown. That's when the regret truly set in, deep and overwhelming, because I knew, without a doubt, that the choice I pushed for was tearing us apart. As Daniel's laughter and freedom grew, so did the weight inside me. I began to realize that the excitement I had chased was hollow. The dates that once felt thrilling now left me feeling empty, more alone than ever. Every time Daniel came home late, smiling from a night out, I felt a pang of jealousy mixed with sadness. I tried to hold on to what we had, the love, the years, the memories, but it felt like trying to grasp water slipping through my fingers. Our conversations became rare and strained. I missed the man who knew every detail about me, the one who had once made me feel safe and cherished. One night, I finally broke down. Sitting across from Daniel at the dinner table, I told him how lost I felt, how I regretted pushing us into this. I told him I never wanted to hurt him, that opening our marriage was supposed to bring us closer, not tear us apart. He looked at me silently for a moment, then reached out to hold my hand. "I miss us too," he said quietly. "But I don't know how to get back to that." That moment was heartbreaking and hopeful all at once. I realized that if there was any chance left for us, it would take more than just words. It would take time, honesty, and maybe even forgiveness, both from him and from myself. After that heartfelt conversation, Daniel and I made a silent pact. We agreed to stop going on dates and instead focus on repairing what we had broken. For a while, it felt like a fresh start. We began talking more honestly, sharing little moments from our days, and trying to rekindle the warmth that had been lost. There were small laughs, shared memories, and tentative plans for the future. It wasn't perfect, but it felt hopeful, a chance to rebuild the life we once treasured. But then, life threw us a curveball. One afternoon, Daniel suffered an injury at work. It wasn't minor, he had to be admitted to the hospital and faced weeks of therapy ahead of him. The physical pain was only part of it, the real struggle was in accepting that he couldn't do all the things he was used to. Thankfully, his employer took care of all the medical bills, so money wasn't something we had to worry about. For the first few days, I was completely devoted to caring for him. I accompanied him to therapy sessions, helped with daily tasks, and tried to be his rock when frustration and fear crept in. But as the days turned into a week, a heavy feeling started settling inside me, something I hadn't expected. It was suffocation. Being confined to hospitals and quiet rooms, watching Daniel struggle and depend on me constantly, left me restless and anxious. The weight of responsibility pressed down hard, and I found myself craving an escape, not just physically, but emotionally. When Daniel's mom offered to stay over and look after him for a few hours each day, I reluctantly accepted. It was during those stolen moments of freedom that I slipped back into old habits. I started going on dates again, telling myself it was just a harmless way to breathe, a temporary break to clear my mind. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a survival mechanism, a way to feel alive when everything else felt suffocating. And soon, I started to enjoy it again. The thrill of going out, meeting new people, and feeling desired stirred something inside me that I hadn't felt in years. At the same time, I realized that Daniel going on dates with other women caused me pain, a sharp, aching sting that I tried to push aside. But when I was out with another man, laughing and flirting, I felt a freedom that was intoxicating. With Daniel sick at home, dependent on others, and mostly confined to the couch or therapy sessions, I felt like I could finally enjoy my life without the usual worries and responsibilities weighing me down. It became easier to justify my outings. After all, I was taking care of the house and the kids during the day, and Daniel had family helping him when I was gone. That freedom, however, came at a cost. Slowly, I found myself becoming distant, not just from Daniel, but from Ethan and Chloe as well. The kids noticed it too. I was less present during their homework, less involved in their weekend activities, and more distracted when they wanted to talk. Looking back now, I see how the combination of guilt, restlessness, and newfound excitement created a wall between me and my family. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but piece by piece, that wall grew stronger, built from choices I thought would bring me happiness, but that ultimately left me feeling more alone than ever. As the weeks passed, the distance between me and my family grew more noticeable. I was physically present but emotionally checked out, caught up in a world that felt separate from the home I once cherished. Ethan started asking why I wasn't coming to his baseball games anymore, and Chloe would shyly ask if I'd read her bedtime stories like I used to. Each time, I'd smile and promise to be there next time, but deep down I knew I was letting them down. Daniel noticed too. His eyes often held a quiet sadness, and sometimes I caught him watching me like he was trying to understand who I had become. When we did talk, our conversations felt like walking on eggshells, careful, guarded, missing the warmth they once held. I tried to convince myself that this was just a rough patch, that the injury and therapy were temporary, and that once Daniel healed, we could find our way back to each other. But I also knew, deep down, that things had changed in a way that wasn't easily undone. One evening, after a particularly long date, I came home to find Daniel sitting alone in the dark living room. The weight of everything, the guilt, the regret, the loneliness, hit me like a tidal wave. I realized then that the choices I had made to feel free and alive were costing me the very things I loved most. That night, I promised myself I had to face the consequences of my actions, no matter how painful that truth might be. After that night, the night I finally faced the crushing weight of my mistakes, I was determined to try harder than ever before. I sat down with Daniel and told him everything I felt. I told him how deeply sorry I was for pushing us into an open marriage, for chasing my own happiness without considering the cost to him or our family. I promised I would be a better wife, that I would put our marriage and our kids first, and that I wanted to rebuild the trust we'd lost. For a moment, I thought he heard me. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes, and I believed that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back. But as days turned into weeks, I realized something I hadn't been ready to face. Daniel had already checked out. The warmth and closeness we once shared had been replaced by a cold, impenetrable distance. No matter how many times I reached out, whether it was with words, gestures, or simply sitting quietly by his side, he kept his guard up. Conversations were short and strained. Physical affection became rare and mechanical. He no longer shared his thoughts or dreams like he used to. It was like trying to hold on to water slipping through my fingers, an impossible task that left me feeling more alone than ever. I begged, I pleaded, I showed up in ways I never had before, but Daniel's heart seemed locked away behind walls I couldn't break down. Once Daniel finally recovered from his injury, I thought maybe things would slowly start to get better between us. I held on to the hope that despite all the distance and pain, we would find a way back to each other. I believed that after all we had been through, the years of love, the family we built, he would fight to keep us together. But I was wrong. Without much warning, Daniel filed for divorce. The news hit me like a freight train. It was as if the ground beneath me crumbled, and everything I thought I knew about our life shattered in an instant. The man I had loved since high school, the father of my children, was suddenly someone I barely recognized, someone who was willing to walk away so easily. My mom was devastated. She tried everything she could to stop it. At first, she approached Daniel with kindness and understanding, hoping to reach the man she once knew, the man who had raised 2 wonderful kids and shared a life with me. When that didn't work, her approach grew firmer, even desperate. She warned him about the consequences of divorce, telling him how it would hurt Ethan and Chloe, how it could damage their childhood and leave lasting scars. She said, "Divorce won't just break your marriage, it will break your children's hearts." But Daniel didn't care. Not about me, not about the kids, not about any of it. His silence and refusal to engage felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest every day. The divorce process was messy, filled with legal battles and heartbreak. My mom assured me I would get half of Daniel's assets, everything I was entitled to after years of marriage. But reality was harsher. I only received a small portion, barely enough to hold me together financially. The rest slipped away, leaving me feeling powerless and betrayed. The most painful moment came during the custody hearing. When the judge asked Ethan and Chloe with whom they wanted to live, they chose Daniel. I remember sitting there in the courtroom, my hands trembling, heart breaking into pieces I didn't know could shatter. My own children, the center of my world, had made a choice that left me feeling like a stranger in their lives. Leaving our home was the hardest thing I ever had to do. The house where we celebrated birthdays, shared holidays, and built memories, it was no longer mine. I packed my things into boxes, trying not to cry as I closed the door behind me for the last time. I moved into a small apartment, a space that felt foreign and empty. I was starting over, building a new life from nothing but pain and regret. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost. It was the loneliest, most humbling chapter of my life, one I never imagined I would face. After everything fell apart, I finally cut ties with Sophie and Hannah. I told myself it was necessary to heal, to close that chapter and move on. But deep down, I knew it was too late. The seeds of doubt and temptation they planted had already taken root, and no amount of distance could erase that. Now, on countless lonely nights, when the world outside is silent and my kids are fast asleep, I find myself scrolling through old photos of Daniel and our children. I stare at their smiling faces, frozen in time, and my heart aches with a heaviness I can't shake. How did a life so full of love, warmth, and promise vanish so completely? I think about the family we built, the laughter echoing through the halls, the comfort of knowing someone had my back, the simple joys of everyday life that now feel like distant memories. With Daniel, I didn't have to worry about the bills, the rent, or the endless responsibilities that come with running a household. Earning my own money was once a way to pamper myself, to feel independent and proud. But now, every dollar I make is swallowed up by rent, insurance, groceries, and all the little things that keep my new life afloat. In this relentless struggle to survive, I forgot about the date nights, the sparks, the excitement that once seemed so important. My focus narrowed to just getting through each day, managing the chaos, and holding myself together even when I felt like falling apart. And at night, when the silence is the loudest and my thoughts won't stop racing, I am haunted by the choices I made, the choice to open our marriage, to chase something new and thrilling, to push away the life I already had. That choice promised freedom, but it took everything instead. Sometimes, I wonder if I will ever find my way back to happiness, or if this is my new reality, a life marked by regret, loss, and the painful lessons that come from wanting more than what I had.